chat. What's going on, y'all? We are back with this is lesson 7 today, and I'm just gonna hop right in. I'm honest. Be honest, I'm a little tired today. I've been training pretty hard, and sometimes like just the natural flow of how all these things come together just ends up being that's just what the fuck it is. So here we are. So last week, just to recap here, last week, lesson 6, we were, what the fuck were we doing? Oh, it was focus, like choosing your focus. Okay, so here we are. So choosing your focus. So basically we've kind of gone through this journey of really starting to put these kind of more conceptual things, like what is your potential, and ultimately how do you kind of create this system in which all these different pieces of yourself can come together as just this holistic thing that is ultimately just one thing. Because that's the kind of the beauty of all of this, and really the challenge of it is, it's really even like your thoughts. If you witness your thoughts, you're only really focusing on one thing at a time. There's like one thought that is happening at a time. And so, realistically can only really focus like intentionally on one specific thing at a time. And that's why, like multitasking, although you can make the argument that, some people do it better than others. And I think there's this is more of a spectrum really. But ultimately, if you look at the people that are very successful at what they do, they've gotten there because they've single-mindedly focused on that one particular thing over and over and over again for a long time. And just like, there's so many reps, and ultimately just this embodiment of that one thing. And so my big thing was like, okay, how do you use that concept of knowing that you can really, if you've just got one thing to focus on, you can really get super deep into that one thing, and at the same time not pigeonholing yourself to where it is just one thing, because every time in my own personal life, every time that I've tried to just focus on one thing, whether it was, okay, I'm just going to focus on lifting, or I'm just going to focus on the business and coaching, or I'm just going to focus on music, or, any number of things. Every time I've tried to essentially remove all of the other quote unquote distractions and just focus on one thing, I always felt this sense that I wasn't really feeling fulfilled. I wasn't really fulfilling my purpose and what I was here to do. It always felt like there was pieces of me that were missing, or that were not being nurtured or neglected. And so that's where ultimately, the first question I asked was, okay, well, how can I do everything? Because that's what I want to do. I want to do all of these different things. And that's when I kind of found Tony Robbins and kind of, used his system, and it taught me, okay, there is actually a way to do all of these different things. But then the challenge that came from that was like, okay, well, now I'm just doing everything. And one, I'm not really doing any one thing that particularly well, because I'm trying to do all these things all at the same time. And so my energy and my resources are scattered. And then 2 was like, ultimately I'm just burning myself out, because I'm trying to do so much all at once. And this is when 2, I kind of, a couple of things started to happen. Was, 1, I realized that I just couldn't keep doing what I was doing, or I was just going to start resenting what I was even trying to do in the first place, and just not want to do it, or just burn out, or get sick, or, any number of things, or all the above. And so I knew that something had to change. And honestly, this was just like last year for me. And so then I started to really, tap into, well, I know that it's important to just focus on one thing. And at the same time, I know that I want to focus on many different things. So then I had asked the question, it was like, how do I turn everything into just one thing? And that was the big shift for me. That was the big question, because as I'm sure I've probably already said, many times, and I'll continue to say, the answers that you are looking for are in the questions that you ask. The questions already come with the answer just by the very nature of asking the question, because the possibility is always present. And so just when you learn how to ask the right questions, that is the first step, and really the only step in identifying those answers. Because again, the answers are implicit in the questions. So if you don't like the answers that you're getting in your life, meaning you don't like what you're seeing in your life, or you don't like where you're at, or whatever that looks like, then you have to learn how to ask better questions. And learning how to ask better questions is also related to knowing what the potential is, so that you can have that frame of reference for how you ask the question. I believe I've kind of already covered this, so I don't need to go super deep into that, but just getting that concept over and over and over again, where if you want the answer, then you have to ask the question that's going to lead you to the answer. So in that sense, it's also putting yourself in a state where you're focusing on what the answer is. So it's like, what is the specific result that you want to see before you start asking any of the questions? Like, what do you want? And knowing that possibility exists. And then once you know what you want, you ask the question that leads to the answer. So many times we just go right to the questions of like, how do I do that? Or what's that going to look like? Or, what's the step to do for that? Like all these different questions pop up when we really haven't gotten clear on exactly what we're looking for, exactly what we want. So if you get clear first on what exactly do you want and recognize that that is a possibility, then you can ask the questions that are going to lead to that answer. So, at first I was envisioning of being able to do everything. And then I asked the question, how do I do everything? And then I got the answer. And then I realized that necessarily wasn't exactly what I wanted. And so I got clearer. So I wanted to do everything, but in the most effortless and fun way possible. And, to be the best that I possibly could at all those different things together. And so knowing that it's very wise and helpful to focus on just one thing at a time, so you can really go deep into that thing. It was the question then became, how do I make everything just one thing? And so that's ultimately what kind of sparked this process, and really what we're getting into. Everything leading up to this was kind of this like prerequisite material that you needed to go through and really like grasp, at least at the very least at a conceptual level, so that you can see how this starts to build. Because now we're kind of getting to this place where the groundwork has been laid, and now we're really going to start putting these things into practice. And so, even through the process of identifying the 4 doctor values and then outlining what your week looks like, which again, like I don't quite remember exactly what's all been covered in these podcasts. But between these podcasts and then especially the free course. So if you haven't like signed up for that, go sign up for the free course, because that's where I really, is essentially what I do is I use these podcasts to really just talk through things, which again, I've alluded to this already too. And then literally right after this, I go and I shoot the video course, because then I have a really good grasp on what it is that I want to cover. So it's just kind of my process, which again is like, for me, the answer to the question of how do I turn everything into one thing. So it's essentially like everything that I do is all related to this one specific outcome. It just happens that the way that I have clarified and envisioned that one specific outcome is in a way that includes all of these different things. So again, for me, it's like the music and the lifting and the coaching and the teaching and just the overall like personal development and life mastery, and essentially being able to express my own genius in ways that feel aligned to me and what I feel like I'm here to do. And so the question then is like, well, how do you do that? How do you make everything one thing? And so what you've got to do is ultimately, and again, I want to stress that this is just a path. This is a process. This might not be exactly what works for you. This might not be what works for everybody. This is just what has been helpful for me and has been my experience and has been helpful for those that I've been able to share this with. So yeah, hopefully it is helpful for you, but if not, just know that this isn't the only way. But my hope is that you can kind of get the principles too, which is why I like these formats where I can really kind of talk things through. So you can get the underlying principles, because if you understand the principles, then you can build, that's like the foundation. You can build anything you want with that. And that's why I'm really big on, teaching the fundamental things that you need to know so that you can spend that and you can use that in whatever way is, meaningful to you, whatever way is useful to you. So the process that I went through and the process that I take people through is, once you recognize that you get to choose the things that you focus on. And this is also where, in this whole concept of meditation, really these practices that for me are just kind of a regular thing, to the point where I don't even really think about it anymore, just because it just happens. Like my morning meditation, the cold shower, doing a tarot reading for the day, doing my, just studying and affirmations for the day, just kind of my own little routine, which we'll get more into kind of routines and flow and all that stuff as we get going. But firstly, we just have to identify what are the things that you are going to choose to focus on. And this whole concept is really coming down to being able to identify what I call the simplest and the highest leverage action items. So is basically what I do and what I did and what I take people through is kind of, you just get a piece of paper. And again, this stuff is simple. So we don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need to, get all fancy with it, but literally just get a piece of paper. I like using white printer paper without any lines. It's just my style, because I just feel more free that way. But just get a piece of paper, and then you're gonna outline basically a list of kind of all of the different activities, all the different things that you feel are important to you, and that again they may either be directly related to some specific outcome that you want. They may just be things that you enjoy doing, and then they also are likely going to tie back in to the 4 doctors, and you'll see how this all starts to blend together, because the whole point is we're trying to really take all of these different things and distill it all the way down into what are the most minimal amount of things that I need to focus on that are going to have the maximal amount of effectiveness and maximal amount of you ultimately just being able to create the life that you want to live, doing what you love to do, doing it in ways that serve yourself and other people, and doing things that ultimately they fill you with a sense of purpose, that you're doing what you are supposed to be doing in your life. Okay. And so again, trying to focus on 100 different things isn't going to be very helpful, because then you're scattered all over the place and it can be really stressful really quick. So what we want to do is we want to ultimately take, 100 or 50 or whatever, even 20 different things, and we want to condense it down into maybe like 3 or 4 tops. Okay. So what you're going to do, and this is what I'm going to kind of walk you through more thoroughly when we go through the course, but ultimately what you're going to do is you're just going to list, just kind of set a clock. I like to do this sometimes if I feel like I'm going to get stuck on things. Just set a clock for like 10 minutes. I don't think you need any more than that. 10 minutes where all you're going to do is just kind of go and just get it out. Like everything that you feel like is something that you want to be a part of your life. So maybe that's like gardening, going out in nature, going for walks, working out, studying, doing some kind of, I call it design work, where you literally just kind of sit and think and contemplate and like journal. But yeah, like design work, journaling, which by the way, is a little side note, like design work, or that time that you take to just sit and to just kind of think. I don't know. Honestly, I feel like it's very, very underrated because we're so used to just like, action, action, action and productivity. But if you are spending a bunch of time doing the wrong shit, even though it feels like you're doing a bunch of shit, if it's not the right stuff, then you're really kind of wasting your time. And you're probably causing more stress than you need to and not even getting the outcome that you want. And for me, again, like last year, from when I was recording this, that was 2023. That was the story of my life. I was like moving very, very, very fast. There was a lot of motion going on, a lot of, just busyness, which, for me felt like I was doing a lot of things. And that kind of gave me that excuse of like, oh, I'm busy. I'm doing a lot of things. So I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But then recognizing that I actually wasn't doing a lot of the right things. I was just doing a bunch of things just to feel like I was doing a bunch of things. And so it can be very easy to fall into that trap, especially if you're, like me, you're kind of that entrepreneur and you're ambitious. You've got like these big goals, big dreams, and you want to just make shit happen, and you're not afraid to fucking work. And that was kind of like, my biggest blessing was also the greatest curse for me, was like, I'm not afraid to do the work. And so the work I did, I just work. And I wasn't really getting the results that I was after, because honestly, I wasn't even that clear on the results that I wanted, which again, is this whole concept of specificity and getting really clear on what you're focusing on and the answer that you're seeking to be able to ask the right questions. This comes through again and again. But yeah, so creating that space to just sit and think has been honestly completely like life-changing for me. And I make that just it's like a ritual now that happens on a weekly basis, where I just sit and think. Like literally this chair, put some music on, I've got my notebook, and I'm just letting things come through. And that's where for me, I can kind of continue to envision the bigger picture and continue to envision how all of these things fit together. Because, if you ask bigger questions, then it might take you some time to really kind of distill and get to the answer of that, which again is like, how do I make everything one thing? And so, the answer of, I have that intention, I envision this end result, but then actually, how do I make that real? That's where the work comes in. And honestly, the work, and this is, again, especially true if you're like an entrepreneur, like a business owner, where your job isn't necessarily to do the things. Your job is to put the systems in place and to make sure that the right things are getting done, and really being honest with yourself of, what are you good at? What do you specialize in? What do you enjoy to do? And aligning yourself to that. And so kind of going back to this list now, where you're like basically just writing down just a whole list, a whole page full, whatever it looks like, all these things that I want to include as part of my life. Okay. And again, it could be like 20 things, 50 things, 100 things, it doesn't matter. Just all of this, put it all down there. Okay. And then, and again, this might take you, like, this isn't something that I would anticipate someone to just be able to just do, and it just clicks right away. And this is also why we've kind of been building even up to this point, even though this seems like something simple, it still kind of takes some of this background information, background understanding of what's going on, so that we can really maximize this point to where you're at. Because as you're going to see, where we lead from here is like things are really going to start moving now, because essentially we're trying to take all these things that just kind of seem all over the place, like just like a big puzzle, where, and I mean, that's kind of a good analogy. So you've got like a big 1,000-piece puzzle, and you see the picture on the front, you see what it's supposed to look like, but then you open up the box, and of course there's like 1,000 different pieces, and they're all over the place. And so we essentially have to be able to take all of those pieces that are all over the place and start to kind of group them. Firstly, you kind of group the pieces that look similar, and then you once you do that, then you're able to really start to boil it down into, okay, this piece goes here, this piece goes here, this piece goes here, and then you can put all those pieces together, and then before you know it, you've realized that bigger vision. You've realized the big picture of what the puzzle is. And so you writing down the list of all these different things are kind of like all these different pieces of the puzzles, lifting weights and music and coaching and building this business and farming and, holding events and, all these different types of things, meditation, tarot, walking, being in nature, going on vacation, all these different things. And then what you can do once you've gone through that, the next step is you've got to then look at that and then really start to, a concept that I learned from Alex Hormozi, although I think he just referenced somebody else, but I heard it from him, is he said, you can do essentially reverse thinking, where you kind of got that big list, and then what you're going to do is you're going to go through and circle the ones where it's like, if this didn't happen, then things would definitely like fall apart real quick. So you're going to go through and you're going to list, and what you'll probably find too is that a lot of things are related. And again, you'll see kind of how you can build into that. But either way, the next step here is you're going to circle the ones that are essentially like they're non-negotiable. It's like, I can't, if I didn't do these, then everything would fall apart. So like for me, training would be one of those, where if I didn't train, then things would start falling apart real quick, even if I was doing a bunch of other things. And in the same breath, when I am training, there's a lot of other things that just tend to fall into place naturally. And one of the clients that I've been working with, for him, it's his diet. Like, he knows that if he can really focus on making sure he's got good quality food and things are prepared, and he's going, grocery shopping regularly, like if he's got his meals in order, if he's got his nutrition in order, then everything else just tends to fall into place. And that's really what we're going for here. We want to find those things that, one, if you didn't do them, then things would fall apart. And usually by extension, doing that thing or doing those things, if you do those things, then a lot of other pieces fall into place. So for instance, me, like what I have identified for myself are really like, I think, yes, like 4 key things. So it's one is, like I said, training regularly. And then 2 is creating music. So that was another one for me. And then 3 was, like I said, design work. So just literally taking time to just sit and think about stuff. And along with the design work is like having meetings, like in specifically like having team meetings with, within the business. Like doing that on a weekly basis, on a regular basis, tends to make everything, a lot of other things just naturally fall into place. And then last thing is like making this content, creating videos. So I know if I do those things, that everything else just tends to fall into place. Because really what we're trying to do here is, and this is kind of a realization I've had, because there's been quite a few times where like I've intentionally just dropped everything, especially kind of in this whole process where I've dropped everything. I've dropped the training, I've dropped the content, I've dropped the meetings, like just allowed myself to essentially just do nothing. Because again, it can be very easy. You just feel like you're doing a bunch of things, even if you're like studying, where you feel like the studying in itself becomes the blockage. Like the new information becomes the blockage from really integrating what is already there. So what I realized by those periods of just dropping everything, I realized it allowed me to really see what was important. And that's something that I really invite everybody to do. It's one of those things, if it's important to you, you'll find a way to make it happen. But taking time, I would say like ideally a week, but if not, just at least a couple days, like even a weekend would be, it could be sufficient. But I would say like a whole week as a good therapeutic dose. But taking a whole week, essentially like just a vacation from everything. And again, and for me, it's like a fast, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to not eat or, really go into that kind of intention, because it's really about a fast from all of my previous structures. So, if I've been real rigid with my diet, then I might just kind of loosen up a little bit and just just not really care too much. Same thing with like, if I've been real rigid with a certain kind of schedule, just letting loose on that a little bit. And so taking a week to just really just be, just do nothing, literally do nothing, just be. Because what happens within that time is it becomes very clear. Not only will you probably had amazing insights on the bigger picture and what you're trying to do, what you're here to do, as all your kind of day-to-day distractions are gone. But it becomes very clear what is like non-negotiable for you, because you'll start to feel like these things that like, man, I haven't done this in a week and I kind of feel like shit, like it just doesn't feel good to me. And so what needs to happen. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is create a system that maximizes the few key fundamental things. And that way you can maximize your ability to just be. Like for me, when I look at my schedule and when I'm creating my schedule, which is again, it's a process that I'm going to end up taking you through on this journey here, but I try to create as much free time as possible, because the free time for me is actually my most productive time, because I'm not just wrapped up in all the day-to-day, all the things to do. It gives me that space. And there's a saying that has come to me. It's like action necessitates itself through being. So through the beingness, through just doing nothing, it becomes very clear on what to do. For instance, like if you're hungry, like if you're just bored and you're not doing anything, you're just like chilling and you're just being aware and present with yourself. If you're hungry, it's just a natural inclination to go and find something to eat. If you're thirsty, go and find something to drink. If you have like, I'm just sitting here, I want to like draw something, you just draw something. That's like, these things tend to happen naturally when you're just allowing that space. And that's the big thing. We're trying to maximize space because we want freedom. So we're not just trying to like pile in a bunch of things on our schedule. We're not just trying to do a bunch of shit for the sake of doing a bunch of shit. We're trying to really identify what are the super key non-negotiable elements that have the widest impact on everything else, and identifying those and then creating systems around those. So it's like throughout your week, there may only be, 3 or 4 very key fundamental things that need to happen. And then everything else just happens naturally as an extension of that. And then you can really start to find this place of flow. As we talk about flow, we want to maximize flow. We don't just want a bunch of shit to do. We want to flow. All right. So let's keep it rolling, y'all. Let's flow. Journey is the way.